I like to say, or at least I like to remind us, that our church is part of a tradition, which we call a living tradition. And that means a variety of things, but one of the things it means is that we are bound by our common history. It also means that we share an affirmation of the great spiritual quest for truth and meaning. It also means that we are held by the promises that we make to one another about the spiritual values that we choose to uphold. We have no creed, no tests of faith. Your doubts and your questions are welcome here. And wherever you are on your journey, we invite you to be part of this congregation in which we draw wisdom from all of the world's religions, balanced with the insights of modern science. For us, the point is to build a diverse, beloved community. And it is our great hope to inspire each other, challenge each other, and accompany each other, as together we act for hope, peace, love, and justice in our own lives and in our larger world. And this morning, I'm excited to share that our message is going to be delivered by one of our very own. Yeah, it's good. Colin Campbell has been a UU for a better part of 50 years, joining us here at UUSG just a few years ago. Some of you may know, but if you don't, Colin holds a BA in history from the University of the Americas in Mexico City and an MS in psychology and counseling from Stony Brook. He taught history and Spanish to high school students. I'm sorry. My kids are in the back row. They're not paying attention. That's fine. He was also the program coordinator for Suffolk County's New York Alcohol and Drug Abuse Services, the director of the Long Island Council on Alcoholism, the founder and executive director of Human Understanding and Growth Seminars, Inc., and the director of and professor in the Chemical Dependency Counselor Program at Suffolk County Community College. His sermon title this morning is An Unexpected Journey. We are very lucky to have him this morning. Thank you, Colin.
Are you a believer? I was stunned. Albert had walked up to me in the narthex of a rather conservative evangelical church that I had been attending, put his face 12 inches from mine and shouted his question. Everybody in the room was turning to see what was happening. Some people were wide-eyed, some were smiling, most were not. But we were certainly the center of attention. And I was dumbstruck. How do I answer that? I've struggled with religion all of my life, and I had attended this church a few times to try and understand that particular conservative mindset. And yeah, I had attended a couple of Bible study classes, and I might just have asked a couple of questions that were not very well received. But I had no idea how to respond. My mind was frozen and going 1,000 thoughts a second all at the same time. Are you a believer or not? Do you even believe in God? Have you ever experienced that strange phenomena where your brain is frozen, but your mouth begins without your permission to speak anyway, and you have no idea what it's going to say? Well, my mouth opened up, and I heard it say, "Oh, which particular God did you have in mind? Zeus, Amun-Ra, Odin, Yahweh? How about Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent that could fly? I always thought he was pretty neat." By the time my mouth had gotten to Quetzalcoatl, Albert had spun on his heel and was walking out of the room. I didn't last very long in that church. But like I said, I've struggled with religion all my life. My parents were not religious people. My father was simply totally disinterested. And the only thing I can remember my mother saying early on was that she thought that religion, in general, had caused far more harm in the world than good. The first actual conversation that I can remember having was when I was in 4th grade. I was new in that school, but that was not unusual. My parents moved a lot in those days. And I had sort of developed a crush on a young lady. Let's call her Sandra Winsome, a very pretty and very popular girl. And as you know, that's the most dangerous kind. One day, I managed to get close enough to her on the playground to actually say something. She glared down at me for a moment like she was trying to figure out just what I was. And then she said, "What church do you go to?" Somehow I intuited that the answer none was not going to be the proper response. So I grabbed out of the air, "The Methodist Church." Her glare hardened and she said, "Well, you certainly can't go to heaven." She turned and almost ran away from me. I asked my mom about that. She just laughed. "Oh, that's just what Catholics believe. It's all a bunch of nonsense." 5th grade, new school again. And in this school, we were given the opportunity to leave school an hour early on Wednesday afternoons to go to a church of our choice for religious instruction. And I thought getting out of school an hour early was a good deal. And again, I chose the Methodist Church, this time because the Methodist Church was a half a block from the school, and I figured that'd be an important factor in the winter. I attended most weeks, and I enjoyed it. And that was my first real introduction to the Christian religion, through Bible stories and an introduction to the Gospels. But the main thing I learned, I think, was that many Christians didn't seem to follow Christ's teachings. And that really puzzled me. I was either smart enough, though, or afraid to ask the question in that class. In high school, amongst other things, I took a course in English history. I was amazed at what we learned about the religious practices and the wars that dominated England and Europe for centuries. It seemed like one could be burned at the stake one year for being a Catholic and the next year for being a Protestant. And I couldn't understand how anyone in the clergy could read and understand the very obvious teachings of Christ and then invent the horrendous torture machines that they used on people that they deemed insufficiently religious. And the wars between nations over the proper practice of Christianity, the Crusades, all of that was simply inexplicable to me. American history was no better. My mother, who was a liberal and a champion of civil rights, certainly filled me in on the truth about slavery and the Native American genocide. Christians indeed. In college, I concentrated on studies that addressed humanity and human behavior in general. History, anthropology, psychology, sociology, comparative religion. All of this answered some of my questions about humans, about religion. Of course, it raised new ones. But I think the main thing that was coming through was, what's the point of religion if nobody seems to follow the practices? I became a high school social studies teacher, but learned very quickly that controversial subjects were not to be entertained in the classroom. This was the era of the 60s civil rights movements, the Vietnam War, all of that. We were forbidden to address anything that was going on. No current events, thank you very much. It was also the era of peace and love, the New Age, as well as the rise of born-again Christianity, and I was as confused as ever. I couldn't understand this stuff called spirituality from either camp. But all of that was put aside as my own alcoholism progressed, and within a few years, I had lost my teaching career, and my wife, Gloria Ann, was ready to leave me. I had the means and the will to end my life, and I was determined to follow through on that. But one day she gave me a slip of paper with a phone number on it, and she said, call. I don't know why I did. I'd given up hope. I'd stopped drinking so many times, but I couldn't stop drinking. The man who answered the phone was cheerful. He was direct. Could I remain sober until he picked me up at 7? Yeah, I could do that. I'd been sober for about a week that time. He and his wife picked me up and took me to my first AA meeting. And it was not at all what I expected. I guess I was expecting a bunch of old Bowery bums in Salvation Army clothes sitting around drinking cold soup and singing hymns. But we walked into a room full of people who were more or less indistinguishable from a UUSG coffee hour. And they were happy, and they were laughing, and they were having a good time. 3 people spoke at that meeting, sharing their own personal experience and strength and hope. And each one of them told my story as well. I was dumbfounded. I was not alone. Others had experienced exactly the same feelings, had been through exactly the same experiences. And all this time I believed somehow that I was unique, that no one else could know or understand. But no, to my utter surprise, this horror was commonplace. And best of all, these people were living examples of the way out of that horror and back to a normal life. There was a way out. I could learn to live again. The couple who took me to that meeting, Jean and Roe, asked me to come to their home after the meeting, and we sat up all night discussing what was then known about the disease of alcoholism. I learned that there was solid scientific knowledge about addiction and that the affliction could be overcome and managed. And as I drove home, the sun was coming up over the great South Bay, and I felt like a new person. For the first time in years, I actually had hope. And from that night and the next few meetings, I came to understand just what the phrase born again actually meant. I felt it with every fiber of my soul. My life was totally changed. There was a problem, and that was the religiosity of the program. All the God and higher power stuff really bothered me. Gene was taking me to meetings every day. I asked him how he dealt with this. His answer was simple and direct. First, he said, what's more important to you, being worried about religiosity or getting sober? Well, that was an easy one to answer. Normal life, thank you very much. Second, he said, do what I do. Note that every mention of God in AA literature is followed by the sentence, as you understand him. He asked me, "Have you ever heard the phrase, God is good?" I said, "Of course I have." "Well, then whenever you hear the word God, just add an O." That was okay. I could work that. I could do that. Good. Then he said, about the higher power thing, he said, "Could you control your drinking?" I said, "No, obviously not. That's why I'm here." "Well, then it must have been more powerful than you. And that now you're in AA and you can stop drinking." Yeah, I'd been successful for a couple of weeks, one day at a time. And I thought I could go on with that. Then the program has enabled you to achieve something you were unable to achieve on your own, another power greater than you. Those concepts, as much as the program, changed my entire outlook on life and religion and spirituality. So now that I was drug-free and had a very different view about life, how do I fold those concepts into this life? So I began reading self-help books. Peter McWilliams, Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins, and others. A lot of it was pretty confusing, but I got some valuable insights, in spite of the fact that McWilliams turned out to be the member of a destructive cult, and Robbins wanted me to walk across a bed of red-hot coals to prove to myself I could do anything. I chose not to do that. I just took him at his word. For a time, I became interested in Native American concepts. The most profound experience that I had there was participating in a communal sweat lodge ceremony that I was invited to with a group of Native Americans of the Lenape tribe, a part of the Delaware Nation. We met on a remote farm in the western hills of New Jersey. I had done a number of sweats before, but never with the indigenous people for whom this is a very sacred event, nor had I ever before or since experienced anything quite so intense. There were some 20 of us who entered that lodge, and as the ceremony unfolded and the heat and steam from water poured onto red-hot rocks increased, I felt as though the skin was peeling off of my body. Only the fact that nobody else seemed to be concerned kept me from running out of there screaming. The chanting and the steaming went on for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. When we exited, everyone went to the well pump where we filled 5-gallon buckets with icy water and poured them over ourselves. And I felt a rush like I'd never experienced before, lucid clarity, intense calm, total freedom. I can't describe it. I wandered off by myself and lay down in the wet grass by the farm pond. I had no clothes on, but somehow I felt warm in spite of it being midnight and maybe 60 degrees. I was fully conscious, but somehow in a different realm. The others had begun to pound their drums, chant, and dance, but I could barely hear them. And as I lay there in total comfort, unlike anything I'd ever experienced, I simply melted into the ground and into the stars. Somehow my body had ceased to exist, and I just was. I didn't sleep that night, and only began to return to my body after the sky lightened. I slowly began to become aware, to know where I was, and to feel cold. I got up and walked up to the barn, got some warm clothes on. Everybody else was asleep, so I lay down on a pile of straw and I went to sleep. And when I woke, the others were outside cooking breakfast over the fire. I started to try to describe what I'd experienced, but they quickly hushed me. They said that I had experienced a very personal and sacred event that cannot be described, but it was well known to them. It was a great gift, a vision. And it did open a new understanding for me, but one that does not invite close examination. Rather, it invites acceptance and gratitude. Some years later, having experienced many deeply spiritual moments, I was finally able to develop an understanding of just what that meant, at least to me. I've come to view spirituality as that transformational experience that somehow allows us to become greater than the sum of our parts, to rise above who we are and become more. I understand that, but I can't really explain it. I just accept it because it's happened to me many times. But then there are things that are deeply personal that we know that we cannot explain, nor is there a need to explain. We just know. And so it's been a bit over 50 years now, and nearly everything that I have done and everything in my life that has happened is a direct result of those first few AA meetings. My marriage to Gloria Ann, who saved my life, has grown stronger over these years. We have two wonderful daughters, adults now and very accomplished in their own lives. I had the great good fortune to be involved in the founding and becoming the director of two programs. One, an intensive life skills and leadership program for high school students called Human Understanding and Growth Seminars, HUGS Incorporated. And the other, a degree program in chemical dependency counseling at Suffolk Community College in New York. And it's an incredible feeling to know that now, 20 years after we retired and came home to Geneva, both programs are flourishing and continuing to help others. The current executive director of the HUGS program was a student in the program when she was in high school, and she credits the program with saving her life. Gloria Ann often shared an analogy with the students in the HUGS program. She said that when you reach out to help someone, it's like throwing a pebble into a pond. The pebble creates a splash, but then a wave that results from that pebble goes out from that point, and it continues as the person you helped helps someone else. And that person in turn helps another. And each of them in doing so throws their own pebble into the pond and creates their own wave. And that goes on forever, long after we are gone and forgotten. And that, I believe, is our legacy and our immortality. And so now, for me, the great existential questions that are often meant to be addressed by religion: is there a God or gods? Is there some sort of organized intelligence apart from those gods that exist simply in the minds of their believers? Some kind of organized intelligence that has created and manages, observes the universe. Is there a purpose to our lives that's greater than that which we put on it? Is there some sort of conscious existence that we experience after we die? After all those struggles, I realized that there was a simple answer after all, at least one that satisfies me. And that answer is, I don't know. And moreover, I don't need to know. So, thinking all the way back to fourth grade in Sandra Winston, when now asked what church I go to, I say the Unitarian Universalist Church, where we are all free to create our own religion, and that I am a born-again agnostic. And when I seek wisdom, I just add an O to the word God and look for good. And I don't care that the Sandra Winsoms of the world think I cannot go to heaven, because as far as I'm concerned, heaven and hell are both right here and right now. And for me, they are what I choose to make of them. So, Some say that experience is the best teacher, but the cost of that experience can be awfully high. And one thing I learned early on in AA is that learning from others' shared experience can be just as valuable as my own experience, but at a substantially reduced personal cost. In fact, that sharing of experience is the basis of all 12-step programs. I've shared my experience with you this morning in the hope that if I have said anything here that you can use in your own life, if there's anything in my experience that is of any value to you, it is yours with my thanksgiving and gratitude. Thank you.
And as we prepare to leave this place, continue your journey in love. Care for one another and care for this, our earth. Do justice and make peace. And as you go, know that whatever taste or touch that you've had in this time and place of hope, joy, love, peace, that goes with you out into the world. We are different for having spent this time together. So remember, live boldly and with thanksgiving. You go in peace. Thank you.